Hello and welcome in another episode. Today I'm not going to show you how to clean carburetor. I'm going to show you how I clean carburetor. My technique might be different than somebody else. That's why I have to say it. This is how I do it. This is how I did it for many years, and that's my technique. It's nothing fancy or complicated or anything special. Some people might do it even better. Customer actually came for that job. I need to remove and clean the carburetor because the bike runs poorly. Now there are many reasons why you need to clean the carburetor. Sometimes you clean the carburetor on a bike that you just bought to know what you have inside, or sometimes it's just a part of normal maintenance. You have to do it every 25 or 30,000 kilometers. What I notice here in Norway that there is so many additives into the gasoline that if you leave your bike for 3 or 6 months over the winter with the fuel inside the fuel tank and inside the carburetor, and you don't use any stabilizers, green stuff starts to grow inside the carburetor. I've seen this many times. I clean a lot of those, and they all usually come at one time of the year, which is March, April. That's when the people pull the bikes out from winter storages, from all those sheds and garages. And they discover that the bike doesn't start. They put new battery, they put the fresh fuel, but the bike still don't start because the carburetors are full of crap. And that's when they come and I have to remove them and clean them. Now, I'm happy that I can show you this on the 4 carburetors, 4-cylinder engine. Because I've seen many videos when they show you how to clean the carburetor on a pit bike or on some kind of moped. I'm choosing this because this is a sort of a semi-complicated procedure, and semi-complicated carburetors is not the easiest carburetor. It has a lot of jets and screws and complicated stuffs. It has a throttle position sensor, it has vacuum membranes, springs and choke and all this kind of good stuff. So I'm not going to show you how to clean it on the very easy carburetor that has almost nothing, no jets, no choke, nothing like that. Also, I'm not going to show you that on a super complicated carburetor simply because I don't have one. What I mean by super complicated carburetors, there are motorcycles that they have some sort of secondary air system and some vacuum valves, and the carburetor is connected to the airbox, and airbox is connected back to the float chamber, and some bikes are just really complicated. This is sort of a normal, classic, what you can find on most of the bike situation. Now, doesn't matter what carburetor you have on your motorcycle. Is it 1, is it 2, is it 5 or 6? I don't care. They all have one thing in common. And that is that to clean them properly, you have to remove them from the bike. Sometimes it's super easy, like on some old BMWs, they sit on the sides, you remove 2 clamps, 1 wire, 1 hose, and the carburetor is out. On some other bikes, it's really complicated, like for example, the old Honda Goldwing 1500. Good luck with that. This is a sort of, again, semi-complicated situation. On enduro and cross bikes and single-cylinder bikes, sometimes you remove 4 screws and the whole subframe flies away with the airbox, and then you just pull the carburetor out. On bike like this, classic motorcycle, classic shape, naked, whatever you want to call it, you have to sort of remove or push the airbox back to free the carburetors, and then the carburetor set, they all come as one because they all connected with 1 big bolts or 2 big bolts or 3 big bolts. But they come and they slide out left or right, depends on the throttle cables. We're going to see on that one. I think they're going to go to the right. The most important thing is that to clean it properly, you have to remove the carburetor from the bike. Don't try to remove the float ball and just get there with some brushes and compressed air. It's not going to work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. You want to do this properly, remove the carburetor from the bike. So like I said, on some bikes, cleaning the carburetors is a part of the normal maintenance, which means the people who design and build the bikes, they thought about removing the carburetors so they not do stupid stuff on some bikes. Like for example, some old Hondas that are super difficult to remove the carburetor because there's simply no space to slide it out. And the rubbers are very hard because they're usually very old. Like on that bike you can see here, The holes for the bolts holding the airbox are actually slides, which means you can lose these two bolts, and there's probably two more on each side, and then you can move the whole airbox. We have to remove the battery. Slide the whole airbox back. Then what's going to happen is that those clamps needs to come off, and then the whole airbox slides back, and then you can loosen these clamps, put the carburetor a little bit back, and then it slides out to the left or to the right. Then you have to disconnect the cables. In the case of 4 carburetors, the cables are usually in the middle, which is kind of tricky to put them on when the carburetor is on the bike, so you have to get it at least halfway out. But we'll see how it's going to go on that one. I don't know what bike you have, and I don't know how hard or how easy it will be to remove the carburetor, but you just have to do it. You need to have these carburetors on the bench. So let's do that. And now here is the situation I was talking about. I removed 3 screws holding the airbox, and I loosened the clamps on the carburetor, and I removed the battery so the airbox have a place to slide back. Will that be enough to remove the carburetor? Maybe, but this is what I was talking about. Now what you can do, you can slide the whole airbox back just like that, and the carburetors are free. This is about 1 centimeter, so free play. So I'm guessing when I remove the carburetor from the intake's rubber, it will be enough to slide it out. Like I said, the cables for the throttle are very hard to remove when they sit between cylinder number 2 and 3. So we're gonna have to slide it halfway out and then remove the throttle cables. But before we do that, we have to remove as much as we can. So we're gonna disconnect the throttle position sensor. We're going to disconnect the choke wire and maybe remove some hoses that will be on their way. Sometimes sliding the airbox back is not enough because it slides just a little bit. Yeah, it's tricky. Like I said, I don't know what bike you have. I don't know what bike you want to work on. Just get your carburetor out, and then I'm going to show you what to do next. Now the small tip I can give you is after you loosen the clamps, if the rubber is not hard, or if it is, doesn't matter, remove those clamps completely from the bike. Just get them off. They're very easy to bend and damage, and then they're not going to fit and squeeze the rubber properly. So if you can, remove it. In case of that bike, they're all the same, so it doesn't matter which one go where. Sometimes they're different, 2 inside and 2 outside. Japanese companies like to put the nice stuff on the outer carburetors and then just simple stuff in the middle, like you can see here. This is very nice chrome shiny cover. The 2 others are just they're not chrome, they're not covered with the chrome because you cannot see them because they're covered with the fuel tank. Sometimes this clamp will be nice and chrome or rust free or something, and then the inner one will be just simple cheap clamp. But remove them, because now when we're going to slide the carburetor back and try to jiggle it to left or right, we can damage them. They're very easy to damage and bend, so just take them off. Now somebody was already trying to take this off, and you can see how they damage it. We're going to try to make it straight. That's why you remove them. I removed the choke wire. The throttle cable will be removed later. Now we can lose the clamps on the intake rubber. You want to make them as loose as possible, but without them falling. There's a screw here and there's a spacer, so try not to get the screw completely out, because then you're going to drop the spacer and then you have to look for it. They can stay on, those clamps can stay on the intake rubber while we work on the carburetor. Now this is loose enough, the clamp goes around, that's okay. Here you go. Now when the carburetors are halfway off, I have access to the throttle and return cable. I'm going to remove them now. As you can see, I'm sliding the carb out. I have to work with all those hoses and wires and cables. TPS cable needs to go somewhere back, so it's not on the way. And as you can see here, If we have those clamps stayed on, we'll be damaging them now while we sliding. Sometimes these rubbers are very hard because they old. You can warm them up. If you're working in a cold environment, you have to warm them up because while you're sliding them and they're not soft, you can crack them, you can break them. So it's important that this rubber is soft. If it's so old and so hard that it's cracking and you cannot even make it soft with the heat gun, you're probably gonna have to replace them. But those ones are quite soft, so it's okay. You should drain the fuel if you're not sure how to remove it. I know I'm not gonna have to drain this carburetor. And there you go. Carb is out. Now I can take them to the bench and just drain the fuel. And then we're gonna work on it. We're gonna disassemble everything completely, remove all the needles, all the jets. And then we're gonna clean them in ultrasonic wash. Put them back on, put them on the bike and synchronize them. So let's get them apart. Yes, the screw is damaged, so it's quite tricky to get it off. Somebody was trying to do something here before me. Well, it happens. The screws here are damaged. All four of them. Somebody tied them too hard and now they corroded. It's very hard to remove them, so I don't want to damage them even more or make some new damages. So what I'm going to have to do is just simply drain the carburetor by flipping it on its sides and let it drain. That's not the method you're supposed to use, but there is no other way. All those screws are impossible to remove without risk of damage. So I'm just going to drain it like that, then I'm going to flip them upside down and continue working. We're going to have to do something with those screws, but I'm probably going to warm this up with a heat gun. But first I need to get the fuel out. Now I'm going to show you why it's important to have this one clean and dry before you drain it. Look at this. You see all those bubbles? They're not bubbles. That's water. Water is heavier and denser than the gasoline, so it drops down. This is water in the fuel. And this one just came out from the carburetor, which tells you there might be water in the fuel tank. And that could be the reason why the bike was running poorly. We're going to clean the carburetors anyway, because if the water can get there, the dust can get there. Before we drop the carburetor body into the ultrasonic wash, I have to remove as much as possible. All the jets, all the screws, everything needs to be removed. We can leave this bracket here that holds all the four carburetors together. This can stay, the butterfly will stay, but we're going to remove all that can be removed. Now, small tip, when you remove the idle jet and the main jet, and you might have some secondary jet, when you remove them, 99% of the cases, they're all the same. So for example, this one is size 40, and usually they all 40. And the main jet is, for example, in case of that bike, in case of this bike, the main jet is 95. And they're usually all the same, but especially when the bike is air-cooled, which means it doesn't have water in the cylinder running around to cool them down, these two cylinders, number 2 and number 3, depend on the design of the bike. These two might get a little bit hotter, which means they're gonna have a bigger jet, idle jet, and the main jet can be bigger. 99% of the cases it's the same on all four, but check, because sometimes I've seen it, they put a bigger jet in two middle cylinders. I'm talking about 4-cylinder engines or 3-cylinder engines. Sometimes the middle one can have a little bit more fuel. Why? Because then it runs cooler. The fresh load of fuel goes into the cylinder, into the combustion chamber, and it cools down. On the V-twin engines, when you have two carburetors, the back cylinder is running hotter than the front one because the front is getting all the fresh air and the back is getting the fresh air only on the sides and the heat from the front one. Many times the back cylinder will have a bigger jet in its carburetor. So before you just drop them in one bowl like I do, I just check if they 95 on cylinder number 1 and 95 on cylinder number 2. So I know that all four are the same, and now it doesn't matter which one go where because they're all the same size. I don't have a repair kit for that one. Sometimes when you order a repair kit, you're gonna get new jets. Look at them, because especially now when people buy this crap from internet with brands, no-name brands, they send you jets that are way too big or way too small. If you buy it a proper kit, then you don't have to worry about it, but I've seen it many times. Customers come to me with the repair kit they already bought on the internet, and the jets are completely different size. They might be the same, they might look the same, but they're different sizes. So just look at all of them, make sure they're all the same size. If they're not, you're just gonna have to remember where they go. Like I said, usually the bigger one goes in the middle. Remove all the jets you can find. Some jets like this here, the little one, you cannot remove them, just leave them in. And we're gonna check if those ones are the same size. 135, 135, and inside is 135. All four are the same. When you do this first time, or you don't have a trouble remembering which jet goes where, don't do this. Don't do like I do. Just put them in separate containers, mark them, put some signs on them that you know where they go, put them in little plastic bags. I do this so much that you can bring me a carburetor like this in a bucket and I know how to put it together. If you're not sure, or you might have trouble remembering, just separate them. When it comes to the float balls, 2 are pointing outwards to the left and 2 are pointing outwards to the right. They will fit, one of them will fit in all positions, but don't mix them, because if you have that one here, then it's really hard to reach the screw for the draining. So make sure that these 2 pointing to the left and these 2 pointing to the right when the carburetor is mounted on. Now let's continue with disassembly. Now this is a vacuum membrane that lifts the needle and allows the carburetor to send more fuel. This one is activated by the airflow through the carb. Just inspect that there is no holes and there is no damages on it. Be very gentle because this rubber is really soft. Now these little golden screws here, they are fuel mixture screws. This is the middle of your carburetor. If this screw sits between the middle and the engine, it's adjusting the fuel. If it sits between the middle of the carburetor and the airbox, it's adjusting the air. Before you remove them, sometimes they're covered with a plug, and this plug is a factory telling you do not turn that screw, do not screw with it, do not adjust it. Sometimes on a performance bike, this screw it has actually like a big knob that you can turn. And sometimes this one is completely filled with some kind of silicone or glue which tells you do not touch it, do not adjust it. I know that in USA, lots of bikes have this screw completely covered and you're not allowed to tamper with it. On most of the bikes, you can screw them out, but before you screw them out, turn them in and count the turns so you know how much they should be turned out later when you put them back in. There's a spring and there is a washer on the top of the spring, and there is the O-ring, and the O-ring, well, most of the time the O-ring will stay in because it's getting glued into the aluminum. So as you can see, all the screws came out, all the springs came out, one washer came out, and the rest stays in. And it's nice to have a set with very little needles and the hooks, like that one for example. There's a very nice hook, and we're probably gonna grab the O-ring with it. Let's go and do some fishing. There you go. That's the washer. Now we're gonna try to get the O-ring out. Hope you can see it. And there's the O-ring. Be gentle with it. They're in a good condition, so we're just gonna reuse them. Oh, this one is 2-in-1. Washer and the O-ring. Yes. We're gonna clean them and put them back in with the grease. It's important to put the grease. Grease dissolves in the gasoline, so it's no problem, but they go much easier. Now they're all out. You have to count them. 4 screws, 4 springs, 4 washers, and 4 O-rings. Put them aside. If you have a repair kit, replace them. Check if they're the same dimension as the old one, because like I said, very often those little O-ring sets comes in different dimensions than they're supposed to be. Now there is no more things I can remove from this carburetor. I'm going to open the choke, lock it so it stays in the open position. We're going to remove the TPS, and then we're going to drop it into the ultrasonic wash. I have 2 ultrasonics wash. One is the big one with the water to wash big elements like carburetors, engine covers, engine halves and stuff like that. And then I have a very small ultrasonic wash with the gel inside it to clean all the needles, little springs, little washers, and the jets for the idle and main jets. Carburetor is ready to go in. All the little guys are ready to go into the jelly. I removed the TPS sensor because they might not like the temperature or the water or the frequency. So let's drop them in, and yeah, let's see what's going on there. This is a gel because it's a small and the gel is really expensive. Drop it in, turn it on, lock it, and it will stop automatically after 5 minutes. I usually let it go 2 or 3 times. Now this is a 30-liter ultrasonic wash with the heat. So the water is hot, and I like to do it when the water is hot because when you remove the part, you can wash it with the cold water, and then it evaporates and it's getting dry very quickly. This is a 40,000 hertz, which is 40 kilohertz frequency ultrasonic wash. It's full of water, not the gel, because the gel is super expensive. And when I will be making millions of dollars on YouTube, then I will fill that one with the gel. But as far as now, it's water, 60 degrees, and I'm gonna set it for 25 minutes. That's enough time to get this carburetor clean, and also enough for me to go home and get some coffee. So you just drop it in. Just like that. Now I turn it on and I go away from here because I don't like the frequency and I don't like the sound. It's really getting into your brain, and it might even cause some damages. I don't know how the camera gonna react now in the microphone, but I'm turning it on right now. So the carb is out from the wash. As you can see, it's all nice and clean. All the bowls are nice and clean. All the jets are nice and shiny. I'm still going to go through them with a set of needles like this, just to make sure that there is no big physical particles inside them. What you do, you take a jet, you go inside, and you spin it. And it's nice if you have the size just like that. It stops now here. Do not spin and push, because then you're going to make it different size from the jet. All you have to do is gently twist, and that's it. Now go from the other side, twist, and then very simply blow it with the compressed air. And now it's a nice clean jet. You can see right through it. I hope you can see it. There you go. Nice and clean jet. You clean all of them like that, and you put them back as they were into the carb. What I like to do, I like to take the part, clean it, and put it straight on. Do not put them back on, so you're not going to lose them and stuff like that. Now, when I'm going to put the spring on a mixture screw, I'm going to put the spring, I'm going to put the washer, and then I'm going to put the O-ring, and now I put a little bit of grease, just so the O-ring slide nicely into the carb, not too much. Now, if there is a grease on the end, it doesn't matter. The grease dissolves in the gasoline and it goes through and it just disappears. So don't worry about that. Just put them as they should be. And then you can just drop it in. And now you screw it all the way in until it stops. Do not go crazy on that screw. It's very gentle thread, and the needle itself is very gentle. Will stop like that. Do not screw it more in. It stops. You cannot twist it with 2 fingers. Then just stop. And now you're going to go out with this screw as much as it was, or as the book says. If it says 2 turns, you go 2 turns. If it says 3.5, you go 3.5. Usually it's going to say between 1.5 and 2.5. This one was 3, and that's what I'm going to do, because I know the bike was running like this. Now I know why it was choking, because of the water. But I know it was running okay with those 3 long time ago. So 3 is okay. We're going to check the spark plugs anyway, just to be sure. But as far as now, we're going to do 3. After the carburetor is installed, it's quite hard to get into the screw in the middle, unless you have a special screwdriver. A very nice screwdriver. You turn it, you can go very deep into the engine. Then you can go onto the screw and adjust it. It's really hard to go with normal screwdriver after they mount it, because there is a frame here and plastics and other stuff. So adjust them nicely before you mount the carburetor. So 3 turns out, and the bike should be happy. Now the main jet is being screwed in the middle here into the needle jet. This is needle jet, has a lots of holes. So it's funny. This is a needle jet and this is a jet needle, and they go together like that. And the main jet is screwed down into the needle jet. All jets and needles. What's important is to check all those little holes and also the hole through it. The hole through is a very big one, but those small ones can be clogged up. It's important to blow them and check them. And they go back in, but they go from the opposite direction. Also, they have a little slot that needs to match the little pin inside the carburetor body. So pay attention. I'm not showing that very precisely because different carburetors, different types, different styles. I don't want you to go and look for this little slot because your carburetor might not have one. So what's important in a carburetor is the correct fuel level. The fuel level is maintained by the floater and a little valve here. Yes. When the fuel level is high enough, the floater floats in the fuel, and by lifting itself up, it pushes the little rubber needle that locks the fuel, and no more fuel is allowed to go into the carburetor. As soon as the engine uses that fuel, the floater drops back down, and this happens constantly while you drive. So you have a correct fuel level. If the fuel level is not correct, you adjust the fuel level by bending this little plate here. I'm going to show you that one. That's the plate that is pushing on the needle to lock the fuel. If you push this one down, it will allow more fuel in, which means the level will be higher. If you push this one up this way, it's going to lock quicker, which is going to make the fuel level lower. So the needle goes on the floater, and now we're going to mount it upside down like this, so it can do its job. When you mount the fuel floater, it needs to be free. It needs to move like that. When you move the carburetor, it needs to move. And then you mount the next one. They're very gentle, so try not to bend them, press on them. Yeah, they're very easy to bend. It's a very thin part, and they're very, very delicate. Now we're putting the gaskets. They're nice and clean, so they can go back on. And remember about those arms, there are two left and two right. You can see it. There's left and right, so they cannot go like this, they have to go like that. So that's the left one, that's the right one, that's another right one, and that's another left one. On some bikes you can adjust the needle height. On that one it's 1. There is no adjustment. All you need to look after is the little lobe here on the rubber that needs to fit into the little lobe here on the carburetor body, so you're not putting that in the wrong position. And also when you're sliding this one in, just make sure the needle goes into the needle jet. Just like that. And now you're aligning the position, and just make sure the membrane sits nice before you put the cover and the spring. Before we put them back in, remember to check if you adjust all the mixture screws. Like I said, if you don't have a special angle screwdriver, it's going to be hard to get to them, especially when they're from the top, like on that one. Usually from the bottom it's a little bit easier, but still impossible sometimes. So just make sure everything is on. The choke cable, check all the screws, because you don't want anything to be loose after. Those screws have been a little bit longer because they have this bracket for the throttle cables and the choke cable. And these little screws with the springs here, they're going to be a little lubricated a little bit with the spray. I'm going to do it in a second, because these screws are actually the screws we're using to synchronize them. What I do, I synchronize the cylinder number 1 to number 2, and then I synchronize number 3 to number 4. And then I synchronize the middle 1, 2 with 3 and 4. I also put the grease around the carbs, so they slide easy into the rubber. And I also put a little bit of grease on the rubber and on the back. Basically, all the connections, metal to rubber, should be lubricated with some grease a little bit, so it's easier to put them in. If you have any trouble with the choke wire or gas wires or any other wires, that's the time to check them, lubricate them, replace them. Nothing wrong here, so we're just gonna focus on getting this one back in. Now, if you change the floaters or the floater needles, the locking valve, you have to readjust the or at least you have to check the fuel level in the carburetor. How you do this, you connect the transparent hose into that little nipple here on all 4 of them. You loop it up and then you fill up with the gasoline, and the level of the fuel inside this hose shows you the level in the flow chamber. We don't have to do it on that one because, like I said, the bike was running and there was no trouble with anything in the carb. It was just water and dust. So now we're going to connect the throttle cables and then the choke cable. Then we're going to synchronize it. So the fuel is connected. The vacuumate is connected. I used to have the one with the 4 glass and metal ball inside. Now I run digital because it's 21st century. So it's just much quicker and a little bit more precise, and this device tells me a little bit more about the valves opening and closing as well. So what we have to do now is start the bike and warm it up, because you're supposed to synchronize the carburetors when the bike is in the operating temperature. That's way out of the alignment. They should be all in one line. No wonder why is this not working properly. Water in the fuel tank plus the bus synchronization. After I synchronize it, it's going to work much better. Now we're going to get number 3 to number 4. So it's dark, it's late, but the bike is ready, starts and runs as it's supposed to. I forgot to film when I was cleaning the tank, but basically I just drain the fuel, make sure it's dry, and then fill up with the new fuel. So yeah, bike can go back to the customer. You might think it's the middle of the night, but it's actually 4:30. So that's it in that video. It's way too long, but still, believe me, it's not even half of what I record. There's so much information I can try to give you about the carburetors and how I work and how I clean them and how they work, and it's just no time. It's easy for me to make a 3-hour video and just talk about one carburetor, which is crazy. I will try to keep it shorter next time. I forgot to film how I clean the fuel tank and how I put it back on the bike. Well, what you gonna do? We all learn, and that's all in today's episode. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, see you in the next one.